Even now, younger coaches like Bobby, like you mentioned, Bobby Knight, and then of course when Dean was coaching, Dean Smith, you admired all of the way he covered the whole field. Like he covered every facet of coaching, from not just the basketball part of it, but the way he dealt with his players and kept the system going was amazing.
Now, so Dean got to know you, Coach, as when he was an assistant at North Carolina, right? Coming up.
Dean became Frank's assistant at North Carolina. That's when I first met him. Yes, even though he was on the Kansas team that beat St. John's in the '52 championship, he was a member of that team. But we always had a good relationship, and I think mainly because Dean was a baseball guy, first, and a basketball guy, and I kind of in the same mold. Dean played more baseball than basketball, and I did the same thing, so we had a lot in common, and he was a great coach. Yeah, he did it all. He did the whole thing. But those guys were really great examples for any coaches.
Tell me about your relationship with Coach Wooden, John Wooden, Coach.
I only met Coach Wooden. I mean, I read everything that he wrote, and I admired his teams, probably watching his teams more than any teams I ever watched, because number one, at the time, what I liked about his teams were they were all quick. They all used the backboard when they were shooting, and they all had short haircuts. They all looked good, and they looked professional. And it's just the way, the class that the team had. So you had to admire the coach because he was responsible. So I think I just liked those three things about his teams. But I met him, I guess I first met him when I coached the McDonald All-America team in '94, I think it was, at St. John's, and spent the week basically with him. We ate breakfast together sometimes and sat and talked quite a bit. And he was very easy to talk to, a very humble guy, a really good person, just easy to be with. So he's just an outstanding individual.
Now, one of his campers was your campers coach was a kid named Lou Alcindor who showed up here.
One of his players, yeah. Well, it was Lou Alcindor at the time, Kareem, but I first met him when he was in the 7th grade. His grammar school coach was a former student at St. Anne's, which is the forerunner of Archbishop Malloy, was the school before, so he went to our school, Farrell Hopkins, and Farrell called me one day and he said, I have a tall kid on the team, I think you should come and look at him. And of course he was way up in the St. Jude's parish near Spuyten Duyvil there. It's in Broadway, nearer to Manhattan College than it is to here, So I said, well, I'll go and watch him. When are you playing? He said, we're playing at St. Rosa Lima on 165th Street in Manhattan this Saturday. So I went to see him play. And it was a tiny court, and he went up and down a couple of times, got winded, got tired easily. And I said, well, yeah, he's 6'8". He's nice and loose. He could be pretty good, I think. So we invited the whole team out to work out against our freshman team. At that time, it was okay, and at that time, there were scholarships allowed in our league. So he came out 2 Saturdays in a row and worked out against our freshmen, and he looked pretty good. So we told him he could come here on a scholarship. And we liked him because he was an excellent student. So we kind of stayed in touch with him, called him every once in a while. Not a lot. And then a few months later, he called me and said, I think I'm going to go to Powell Memorial. So
it was an Irish Christian boy.
He said, your trip, it's such a long trip to Malloy. I said, well, I think it's a long trip too. It took him an hour and a half to get here from where he lived. And it took him like 20 minutes to get to Powell. So I said, I think it's too long a trip too. So it is a pretty long trip. So it might be a good decision. But looking back on it, I think he was, if I had volunteered to pick him up and drive him here, he probably would have come because he liked the school a great deal. And instead he got the Power Express, which we called the Power Express, which was Jack Donahue's car, because Jack lived in Yonkers and went right by his house on the way to school every morning. So I'm sure he got lifts from the Power Express to go to school, you know. And plus his best friend, Art Kenny, I think was playing on Power. He was a year ahead of him, so that didn't hurt. But and then when he was in high school, he was my counselor in my room, you know, at Donahue's camp. Him and Frankie McLaughlin were my two counselors. Yeah.
Holy Cross, is it right?
Holy Cross College, and then he became the national coach of the Canadian national team for 17 years, and they made 4 Olympics, and he was the reason, basically. He brought the awareness of basketball to Canada, which was strictly a hockey country, and it still probably is, but basketball is much more important up there now than it was before he got there. He did a great job in Canada. And one of our boys was his assistant, Steve Konchalski, Tom's brother. So Jack was a great coach, great high school coach. He did a great job with Louis Alcindor, and deserved a better fate here in this country as far as college coaching goes. I thought he was as good as anybody out there as far as coaching. And he proved that with the national team of Canada.
Right. Coach, in the old days, I have to switch gears for a second. Kids would just go out in the backyard, play baseball, play basketball with their friends. Now we have this highly intense mentality of a lot of parents and kids. What would your advice be to the mothers and fathers out there trying to figure out, especially the ones who really don't know and don't understand sports, of the way they should approach it for their kids?
Well, I think Bobby Knight at that Frank McGuire seminar said it better than I could, that there's nothing wrong with the kids nowadays. It says it's the parents that it goes back to Abe Lincoln's old saying that anytime you do things for children that they can do for themselves, you weaken them. And that's a pretty good philosophy. I think the parents nowadays do too many things for their kids because they want them to have everything. And instead they don't have to work for anything themselves or do anything for themselves. They get too accustomed to their parents doing it. We had a youngster standing outside the back here one day from our basketball program. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm waiting for my father to pick me up." I said, "Well, you don't live that far from here. You could get home easily." He said, "Yeah, but that's his job. He has to pick me up." So I said, I don't really think that's his job. I think he's just being too good to you, which is the case. I think parents are kind of overdo it now with their kids. They don't give them any breathing room. They want to be on top of them all the time. They want to be with them all the time. And then the kid never gets to do things on his own, to be independent,
What about this sports specialization, Coach, where these kids at very early ages, 10, 11, and 12, are becoming one-sport kids and missing out on what you grew up with and what I grew up with?
Yeah, well, when we were younger, nobody played one sport all year long. You played whatever sport was in season. That's a long time ago, but now I think they all think that if they want to be really good at one sport, they should just do that sport all year long because other kids are doing it. And to compete, they have to do it. And it has its merits, but sometimes youngsters that play football become pretty good in basketball too because their aggressiveness is there. They learn how to compete better, I don't think it hurts them at all to play a couple of sports. I think it's good for them. It's just on a younger levels, too many sports are too organized for kids now. They don't go out and play on their own enough. They have to have somebody with them to organize them and tell them how to do it and wear uniforms. And years ago, we just went out and played on our own.